Okay, so the last class we took,
The last
one, right? The last one that we took, we was talking about what? What was we talking about?
We were talking about.
We were talking about, what were we talking about
The benefits.
The benefits, the 5 pillars of Islam.
No, we were talking about the benefits of fasting.
We talking about being what?
Fast.
Being
A Muslim.
Being a fast
being grateful,
for what you have.
right? We was talking about being grateful and showing gratitude to Allah.
Wait, so now you
Yes.
this the Muslims?
We was talking about being grateful to Allah, showing gratitude to Allah.
Do we have your next fast?
No, inshallah.
What do we have?
You'll see next. You'll see who you have.
Please.
So Ramadan is a month of piety. Ramadan is a month of piety, righteousness.
What's piety?
Righteousness. Right, to have righteousness, to have fear of Allah. Allah the blessed and the most high, the most merciful, the bestower of mercy, commanded his servants with piety.
Isn't there a surah that
Rahman. Surah Rahman.
No, it's like a surah that says the most high.
Sabih ismi rabbika al-a'la. Sabih ismi rabbika al-a'la.
I can say a little bit of it.
MashaAllah. Khair, inshallah. Pay attention, guys.
Yes, she did. No, I didn't.
What you say?
Yamakullah.
Yarhamakullah. May Allah have mercy upon you. Allah the bestower, Allah the blessed and the most high, the most merciful, the bestower of mercy, commanded his servants with piety. He commanded us with righteousness, through which they will achieve happiness in this life and on the day of when the witnesses will stand forth. And they will earn his pleasure, successfully attain his abode of dignity, and be safe from his fire and punishment. It is his instruction to the first and to the last people. It is that which Allah has instructed all of mankind with. As Allah mentions in the Quran, guys, I need you to pay attention. Allah mentions in the Quran, instructed all of us, instructing and telling the people, telling mankind, وَلَقَدْ وَصَّيْنَا الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ وَإِيَّاكُمْ أَنِ اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ. And we have instructed those who were given the scripture before you and yourselves to fear Allah.
We're doing the same thing again.
To fear Allah. But if you disbelieve, وَإِن تَكْفُرْ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ غَنِيٌّ حَمِيدًا. But if you disbelieve, then to Allah belongs whatsoever is in the heavens and whatever is on the earth, and ever is Allah free of needs and praiseworthy. So this is a commandment from Allah for us to be righteous. This is a commandment from Allah for us to be righteous, for us to have piety, to be righteous, servants of Allah. This is a commandment that Allah has bestowed on his servants, that we be righteous, to be good servants, to be good people. Righteousness for the sake of Allah, as Allah has instructed us to be. He also legislated for his servants to fast the blessed month of Ramadan, to actualize the fear of Allah. As Allah, he mentions in the Quran, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. O you who believe, observing the fast is prescribed for you as it was prescribed for those before you, so that you become piety, so that you become righteous. This is what fasting helps the person to become. Fasting helps the person to become conscious, to have piety, to become righteous. As it is mentioned, so that you may obtain piety through fasting, because fasting is a course to piety, due to what it entails of suppressing of the soul. Like when you fast, it suppresses you from doing things. Yes.
The first person in the world was Adam, right?
Huh?
The first person was Adam, right?
I'm only answering questions pertaining to what I'm talking about. So the person who is fasting, this enables him to act a certain way. Right? When you are fasting, this helps you act a certain way. It keeps you from saying certain things when you're fasting. Fasting, through fasting, it is a course to piety due to what it entails of suppressing of the soul and subjugating of the lust. And suppressing it, keeping it from doing things, keeping it from saying things that it shouldn't say. When we fast, we should only say that which is good. So the fast in this noble month was not legislated except for the actualization of piety. It wasn't legislated except that the person actualized the taqwa, the fear of Allah, piety, that he must act and do certain things according to that which is pleasing to Allah. Which is pleasing to Allah is that you read the Quran during this month. That you remember Him by what? Like saying Subhanallah. Remembering Allah by saying Subhanallah. Allahu Akbar. Wa la ilaha illallah. Right? This is how you remember Allah. Especially during this month where the deeds are multiplied. Rather, it is one of the things that assists most to achieve. Fasting helps the person to achieve righteousness. When you leave off of your food and your drink, and you're leaving off of things that Allah is displeased with for His sake, it is one of the things that assists most to achieve is taqwa, is righteousness. It helps the person to achieve this righteousness of Allah, consciousness of Allah, to fear Allah. As Ibn Qayyim, a famous scholar by the name of Ibn Qayyim, he said, fasting has an amazing effect in preserving the physical outer strengths and the spiritual faculties, and protecting them from imbalance, to protect them from any imbalance that brings to them harmful elements, which if gain ascendancy will ruin and spoil them, and it has a remarkable effect in eliminating all harm entities that prevent them from being healthy. So therefore fasting prevents the health of the heart and limbs. Therefore fasting preserves the fasting, it preserves the heart and it preserves the limbs, and it returns to them all that which has been stolen from them at the hands of the lust and desires. It is from the great aids in attaining piety, as Allah He mentions, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykumus siyamu kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. That when a person fasts, especially during this month of Ramadan, as Allah He mentions, O you who believe, observing the fast, it is prescribed for you as it was prescribed for those before you, so that you become piety, so that you become righteous. When you don't have any food in your system, when you haven't eaten anything, or you haven't drunk anything, right? You don't feel like, doing too much. You have a desire, your desires are lessened. Your desires are lessened. And likewise, the fasting, it is a school, right? Fasting is a school that you go to learn. I'm using examples. This is an example. Fasting is a school that you go to learn. A school that you go to learn. You learn many things from fasting. The fasting person trains himself to be conscious of Allah, to be aware of Allah, the Most High, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he abandons what his soul desires, even though he has the ability to carry this act, due to his knowledge that Allah is watching him. When you fast, you leave off of certain things due to the fact that you recognize that Allah is watching you. Allah is always watching you, so you're on your best behavior. Fasting constricts the pathway of the devil. Fasting makes the pathway of the devil hard to get to you. It's hard for the shaitan to get to you during Ramadan. It is hard for the devil to get to you during Ramadan than any other months, than throughout the whole year. Just because the shaitan, he is chained up. Right? The shaitan is chained up during the month of Ramadan. So he cannot get to you. He cannot get to you this month. He is chained up. He is chained up during the month of Ramadan. So the fasting person trains himself to be conscious of Allah. So he abandons what his soul's desires, even though he has the ability to carry this act due to his knowledge that Allah is watching him. Fasting constricts the paths of the devil as he flows through the son of Adam like the passage of blood. Through fasting, his influence is weakened, and the person commits less acts of disobedience due to the fact that the person is fasting. The person commits less acts of disobedience. You are more aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when you are fasting. Consciousness of Allah. Taqwa of Allah is to obey Him by implementing His commands and abandoning His prohibitions. This meaning of this taqwa, the linguistic meaning of taqwa, for the servant to place a shield between himself, what he fears. So therefore the servant having taqwa of Allah means for him to place a protection between himself and what he fears of his anger and his wrath and his punishment, which will shield him from that. This is not possible except by performing acts of obedience and abandoning disobedience. This is what the fasting do to a person. The fasting, it prevents the person from doing acts of disobedience, and it causes the person to do more obedience to Allah. Allah sometimes commands His servants with taqwa of Him, as He is to be fed and He is hoped for, and all good that befalls the servant is from Him. Sometimes He commands with taqwa fear of the fire, which is the final destination for those who oppose Him, for those who oppose this taqwa of Him and following their desires. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions, فَاتَّقُوا النَّارَ الَّتِي وَقُودُهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةُ أُعِدَّتْ لِلْكَافِرِينَ. Then fear the fire whose fuel is men and stones, prepared for the disbelievers. So this is what the fasting does. The fasting prevents the person from disobeying Allah. When you fast, it prevents you from disobeying the commandments of Allah. As Allah He mentions, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِكُمْ نَارًا وَقُودُهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةُ. Allah He says, "O you who believe, ward off from yourselves and your families a fire whose fuel is men and stones." So sometimes He commands with taqwa, fear of the day of resurrection, the day of recompense, and happiness or misery. And the day when the pious, the muttaqun, will receive their reward, and the criminals who oppose this commandment from Allah, those who are criminals, those who go against the commandments of Allah, will receive their torment and punishment. As Allah He mentions, وَاتَّقُوا يَوْمًا تُرْجَعُونَ فِيهِ إِلَى اللَّهِ ثُمَّ تُوَفَّى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ مَا كَسَبَتْ وَهُوَ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. And be afraid of the day when you shall be brought back to Allah. Be afraid of a day that you shall be brought back to Allah. Then every person shall be paid what he earned, and they shall not be dealt with unjustly. Yes. So the month of Ramadan, it brings a person to having consciousness of Allah. It brings a person to fear Allah. It brings a person to be consciousness of Allah, to have fear of Allah. Right? Go to the other one. So the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, would advise his companions with the fear of Allah. He would advise his companions to be conscious, to be pious, to be righteous. So this is what we should do. This is what fasting does. Fasting helps you to become pious. It helps you to become righteous. You understand? By you leaving off of your food and your drink for the sake of Allah, and you suppressing your desires of what you like to do or what you want to do, this makes you a better person. This makes you a better person. So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would advise his companions to have taqwa of Allah. And likewise, the people of the past, the righteous people of the past, the Salaf al-Salihin, they attach significance and importance to the actualization of consciousness of Allah, of the fear of Allah in their own selves. And they were committed to accurately explaining its meaning and its foundations. They continuously used to advise one another with taqwa. They advise each other, don't do that, don't do this. Right? They advise each other, don't do that, fear Allah. Fear Allah, what's your name?
Ilyas.
Fear Allah, Ilyas. Don't do that, Ilyas. Allah is watching you. Don't say that, Ilyas. Allah hears you. Don't say that, Ilyas. Allah hears you. even if you was whispering. Even if you were whispering, Allah still knows and hears you. He knows what you're saying. And they were committed to accurately explaining its meanings and its foundations. They continuously used to advise with this to be conscious of Allah, to fear Allah. Ibn Abbas, he's a famous companion. He's a knowledgeable companion of the Messenger of Allah. He said, the people who possesses taqwa are those who fear Allah's punishment. Taqwa is fear of Allah. To fear doing something because you know that Allah sees you. Right? You fear Allah because you know Allah sees you. So, there are those who fear Allah's punishment, which is earned by those who abandon what they know of the true guidance. And they hope for Allah's mercy, which is earned by affirmation and belief in what He revealed. Affirming and believing what He revealed. What's that on your lip?
Look.
You got something, it fell right there. It fell on you. It was on your lip. Al-Hasan al-Basri, one of the scholars of the past by the name of Al-Hasan al-Basri, he said, the people who possess taqwa, they are called muttaqun. Muttaqun. They are the ones who have piety. They are the ones who have taqwa. The muttaqun are those who protect themselves for what they have been forbidden, and they perform what has been made obligatory upon them. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, he said, taqwa of Allah is not fasting during the last day, during the day, and standing in prayer at night, and then spoiling this obedience with disobedience. Rather, taqwa of Allah is to abandon what Allah has forbidden and to perform what He has made obligatory. Ibn Mas'ud, he said, explaining this ayat, ittaqullaha haqqa tuqatih. Ittaqullaha haqqa tuqatih. He said, fear Allah. Allah as He should be feared. Fear Allah as He should be feared. This means to fear Allah as He has the right to be feared. And it is that He should be obeyed and not disobeyed, and remembered and not forgotten, and He should be thanked and not shown ingratitude. So this says some meanings of taqwa. This is what the meaning of taqwa means. Is to do that which Allah has commanded you to do.
You obey Him?
Obey Him. And you stay away from what Allah has commanded you to stay away from. And every time you make a mistake, you say what? Astaghfirullah. Every time you make a mistake or you err or you disobey Allah's commandments, you seek Allah's forgiveness. And you say what?
Astaghfirullah.
Astaghfirullah. Astaghfirullah. So this is a reminder that we want to remind ourselves with. Inshallah ta'ala. Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.